I got stuck here. Hold on. There we go. All right, so just a little bit about me real quick. Been in the business for 37 years in staffing. Started a staffing firm, co-founded a staffing company in Indiana in 1987, grew it to a rather substantial size, almost $400 million. Sold it in 2011 to a French staffing company by the name of Group Crete. And they were looking for a platform in the U.S. to be able to enter this U.S. market, the largest staffing market in the world. And that happened in 2011. And then I stayed on with the company until the end of 2019. I'll tell you more about that in a second. The company was, well, actually, I was in the top 100 SIA most influential staffing professionals 3 years running. The company hit the Inc. 500. I think it's the Inc. 5000 now, that list 4 times in its history. And we did that both through organic and acquisition growth. It's kind of hard to get to 400 million without making a few acquisitions. And we did that and did that very successfully and had a great run. Now I find myself with a company called Terra Firma Marketing. So how did that happen? Well, when I left my company in December of 2019, again, the acquisition took place in 2011. I stayed on for 8 years as the CEO and then left at the end of 2019 in December. Got a call in January from the principal of the marketing company that had been working with me in my staffing firm. And he was getting ready to retire. And long story short, he was selling the business and I ended up buying it. My intent was to, and this had been a marketing firm that had been around since 1982. My intent was to rebrand it, retool it, and provide those fantastic marketing solutions to our industry, to the staffing industry. That's what Terra Firma Marketing does. Terra Firma is a Latin word, which actually means solid ground. My idea was to have a marketing company that builds a very solid and firm foundation for staffing firms in terms of their marketing programs and their marketing efforts. Doesn't have to be complicated. I think simple is a strategy. It really is if you do it right. And that's really our sort of our go-to-market mission is keep it simple and think of simple as strategic. What do we do? Well, we build websites, we design websites, we host websites, we upgrade websites, we do a lot of website work. We work with companies on their branding and messaging. We manage social media platforms for our staffing firms and write content, original content, and curate content and do all things social media. We also help them with lead generation through email campaigns and other sorts of campaigns. And of course, provide marketing collateral, marketing materials, print and digital. So all things marketing. All right, so the commercial's over. Let's talk about what we're here to talk about. So first of all, I'll talk about I'm going to give you my definition or the Terra Firma definition of sales and marketing, because I often find that, and this was true when I was on the other side of the desk, that it's easy to think of marketing as sales and sales as marketing, to think of them as one. And I come across clients and prospects a lot of times doing what we do now at Terra Firma who are under the impression that, well, sales and marketing is all the same. Well, no, it's not the same. These are two distinct functions that need to be defined uniquely and then aligned appropriately. And that's what we're going to talk about. We'll also talk about some of the common misconceptions about marketing in our industry. There are a bunch. We'll talk about how an effective marketing program drives revenue top line and satisfies the needs of both clients and candidates. Inside look at aligning the sales and marketing functions. I said we're going to talk about how do you align them? How do you connect them so that they are effective? I'll show you a very simple, again, simple is strategic, a 3-step marketing plan to give you some ideas to start if you're not doing that now, and then a high-level view of the entire marketing process. And then we'll have some time for any questions you might have. So I find this slide very interesting. I use this in all my presentations, no matter what the topic is. if it's anything marketing, I always use this slide because again, I think it describes perfectly what has happened over the years. So if you look at well, first of all, I say that marketing is the journey from invisible to unignorable. We'll talk about that more in a minute. But look at this graph. Look at the left-hand side. Marketing used to play. So if you look at the entire prospect to client process as this upside down triangle, so the prospect becomes aware of you and then is interested and then consideration all the way through to becoming a client at the purchase level. If you look at the left-hand side of the slide, marketing played a very limited role back in the day, prior to the digital explosion, if you will, or digital revolution, whatever you want to call it, a very limited role in that marketing and sales process or that process of generating a new client. So marketing was primarily tasked with the responsibility for getting the brand on the radar screen, if you will, and generating a little bit of interest in the marketplace. Beyond that, then it was up to sales to take it from there, all the way through consideration, intent, and all the way to getting a check. That has changed rather dramatically now. If you look at the right-hand side of this graph, and now that we have digital tools and all the things, and AI and all the things that we have that are coming to bear on the marketing and sales process, marketing has taken a much larger role. So now, rather than just getting on the radar screen and developing a little bit of interest in the marketplace, marketing can now, through digital and AI tools, take this all the way to even to the evaluation stage, and then sales can step in and basically close the deal. So this is the ideal world. This isn't happening very effectively or very efficiently, if you will, in our staffing industry yet, but that's the mission that Terra Firma has, and that's the mission that I have, is to help everyone in staffing to be able to make this transition and use marketing more as a weapon, if you will, to be able to close more deals. That's what we're going to talk about. So I said that marketing is the journey from invisible to unignorable, or being completely unknown to being someone that you simply can't be ignored. So you start out, again, it's how many times have you made a sales call, for those of you in sales or that have dealt in sales in the past, have knocked on a door and given the contact, the prospect, your business card, and they say, "I've never heard of you." I had a $400 million staffing firm. I would still sit down in front of prospects from time to time who would say, "I've never heard of you." So this is a constant battle that we face, is becoming visible, just simply getting on the radar screen, just being able to be recognized as, okay, I've heard that name before. You probably heard that as well too, right? That's taking the step from invisible to at least being visible. I've heard the name. And again, these are all things that marketing, from that previous slide that we looked at, that marketing contributes to in a very significant way. So now that they've heard the name, now that I'm visible, now I want to be noticeable. I want to be someone who gets the response that says, "Yeah, I've seen you guys around. I've heard this name before. Not just I've heard the name, but I've heard this more than once, or I've seen your information, or you are noticeable to me." Then once you've gotten to that stage, and the idea is to make this a purpose that becomes interesting. A prospect says, I think I'd like to know more. So up to this point, if you go back to this, it's just, hey, I never knew who you were. Now I know who you are. Now I notice you. But now we want them to say, I think I'd like to know more. Maybe they're not even saying, I want to know more. It's just, I think I might like to know more. That's a step forward, right? And then from there to being able to say this, you have a compelling, you've got a compelling argument. You have a compelling message. You have a compelling offering, however you want to say that. But it's something now that makes sense to me, that I'm very interested in. I was just interested here. Now I'm extremely interested, and I'm compelled to know more. And from that point, then you become someone who has completely captured the interest and intent of that prospect. And ideally, we hope that they convert to a client. Again, we'll talk more about how that fits into the marketing and sales process in a minute. Well, how does marketing do this? How does marketing help you come from unknown to unignorable? Well, it's a combination of strategy and tactics. And again, one of the things that I constantly come up against in our staffing world, and I have to admit, I was suffering from the same problem until I hired the marketing company that I now own. Strategy was often something I just hadn't really thought about, and our staffing clients that we work with, our prospects that we talk to, quite often really haven't thought about strategy. They're over on the right hand side of this, the little marketing, the little M, or the tactical things that you do. So lead generation, websites and collateral and trade shows, and they're doing all of these things, PR and advertising, boosting, Facebook and boosting LinkedIn, or they're doing all of the tactical things, but they're doing them in a very unorganized or inconsistent process. Why? Because there hasn't been any thought to the big M, the big marketing, the strategy side of this. Strategically, what is the plan that you will follow in order to execute on all these tactical items? What strategically are we trying to do? And the big M, as you can see, is things like, well, what is our why? What's our company in terms of the offerings that we have? Who is our competition? Who's the ideal customer, the profile of the ideal customer, things like positioning and our value differentiations, how we're pricing ourselves, how we're segmenting ourselves, messaging what we're saying. Those are all strategic things that we often skip over because we're excited to do all of the execution and tactic things. Why? Because staffing people are like that. We want to make things happen, right? We love to execute. We don't necessarily like to sit back and think strategically, big picture, and put all those things together. But it's so important because having a strategy that pulls all of these things together consistently and uses them in a way that they complement each other, that's what we call synergy. So that's the old 1 + 1 = more than 2. So strategy follows tactics follow strategy, or strategy precedes tactics. That's really the key message, I think, here in this slide. So let's talk about definitions. So when we talk about marketing, what are we saying? Well, my definition here, or Terra Firma definition, is a process by which an organization with a product, or in our case, a service, moves an audience towards the organization. So we're pulling the prospects towards us. That's what marketing does. Again, think back to I'm invisible, and then all of a sudden I'm visible, and the various stages to unignorable. Marketing is charged with responsibility of drawing the target audience towards the organization. Or you could say it another way. Marketing is the process of turning unqualified leads into qualified leads. That's it. Unqualified leads, unknowns into knowns, right? Well, then what is sales? Well, sales is the opposite. So here I define sales as a process by which an organization with a product, or in our case, a service, moves the organization towards an audience. So it's just the opposite. So this is what I would call a push side of marketing. So sales is outreach oriented, right? And marketing is inbound oriented, moving the organization towards the audience. That's what we're talking about when we talk about sales. Or to say it another way, sales is the process of turning qualified leads, which marketing generates, into customers. So you can see there's a clear connection between the two. And again, we're going to talk in a minute about how do you align those correctly. Well, first of all, this kind of puts marketing in its, I think, in a appropriate way in terms of telling a little story. The story is, well, the circus is coming to town. I know Barnum and Bailey, I think they're defunct now, right? There's still circuses out there. So I hope you all have been to a circus or will visit a circus, something very unique. But so the circus is coming to town. Let's talk about how marketing ultimately can help with bringing people to the circus, right? So if the circus is coming to town, we said that it is, and you create a sign saying the circus is coming to the town, coming to the fairground, or wherever they're coming, we'd call that advertising. So we have a sign, we've got a banner, it's out. We're advertising that the circus is going to be here soon, right? Now, if we put that sign or a similar sign on the back of an elephant, and we parade that elephant through town, Well, now I would call that promotion. Now we're promoting the fact that the circus is coming to town, right? Well, let's say we walk the elephant through the mayor's flower bed or the mayor's garden, right? If we do that, now we've created some publicity, right? There's some buzz about this circus. So we call that publicity. Then if we get the mayor to make a statement about the elephant walking through his flower or his garden or her flower or garden, flowers or garden, now we have public relations. But there's one step left. This sounds very random, right? But if we did all of this on purpose, if this was our strategy, remember strategy? Those are all tactics, right? But if we had a strategy and we did all of these things intentionally, we did all these things on purpose, that's what I would define as marketing. Well, there's one step further, right? Marketing leads to sales. Well, ideally, if we've done all of these things, we did them strategically, we did all these things, we got promotion, we got advertising, we got publicity, we got public relations, and people showed up to the circus and spent money. Well, marketing generated sales, right? That's a perfect, I think this story is, I know it's kind of silly, but it's a perfect example of how all of the various functions or parts or elements of a marketing strategy can ultimately generate sales. And that's really the key. So always remember that the circus, the elephant, the mayor's flower bed or garden, and the folks coming to the circus getting their wallets out. That's the idea. What are some of the misconceptions of marketing? Our brand is our logo. I can't tell you how often I hear this from my staffing clients and my staffing prospects. Our brand is our logo. Well, your brand, your logo is part of your brand, but your brand is not uniquely your logo. So the logo is simply one element. We saw that earlier in the small m, right, in the tactics. But I have to constantly educate my prospects and my clients that, well, your logo is just one part of it. But it's a misconception we have to constantly deal with. Well, another one, marketing is advertising. Well, if I'm advertising, I'm marketing. Well, no, advertising is part of marketing, but it's not all of marketing. So as we've just proved in our circus story, it's one part of the marketing function. So it's often misconceived or misconstrued that if I'm advertising or spending money somewhere, that's marketing. Another misconception, well, we're just not big enough to do marketing. We're not capable of, we can't hire somebody to do marketing. Well, there's a lot of things that some of my smaller staffing clients are doing that we've helped them. I mean, just improving their social media presence. That's a marketing tactic. And anybody can do that, no matter how big or small you are. So you're never too small not to be able to provide some sort of marketing effort for your staffing organization. This one is constantly, this one just drives me crazy. And I have to admit, I was one of these folks. And again, we're staffing people. We like to make things happen. We want to see things happen tomorrow, next week, right away, right? Great marketing delivers fast results. That's a huge misconception. Another area that I have to constantly educate my staffing clients and prospects that this is not an overnight success. This is a long game. This takes time. I typically ask my new clients to commit to 12 months with me. We're going to do various things. We're going to improve your marketing or your messaging and your branding, and we're going to improve your website look and feel. We're going to improve your social media presence and up your game in all of these areas. But it isn't going to happen overnight. I need 12 months for you to start really seeing some really solid results. Now, it won't take, in some cases, it doesn't take 12 months, but to really get a solid marketing effort and make it habitual, that's the other thing. A misconception I don't have on here is quite often we think that, well, we start getting results like we do with sales and recruiting or business development and recruiting, right? We constantly shift back and forth depending on where the fire is. No, this is once we've habitually trained the organization that marketing is an important part of our overall growth strategy, it will become part of the culture, but it takes time to do that. I have a friend, I know somebody who can put something together for me. I hear that all the time. Hey, I can, throw some couple ingredients together and I'll make lasagna. Well, you may make lasagna, but I'm not going to eat it. As we talked earlier, there are lots of things involved, the big M, the little m, lots of strategic things and tactical things that need to come together in order to do marketing and to do it right. Well, marketing's only good for generating new customers. No, marketing is good for much more than that. It's, as we talked earlier, it's good for promoting your brand. It's good for being more aware and engaged in the community. There's marketing is communication, and so it's not just closing deals. It's communicating in various channels who you are, what you stand for, and um, by process of elimination, who you're not and what you don't stand for. Social media is for young people. I have clients that are, they've been around a while like me, and they say that, well, I just don't do social media. I don't do Facebook, or I've got a LinkedIn page, but I don't do anything with it. Well, it's really not as scary as it looks. And we teach our clients how to put together a social media program that anybody can manage and anybody can engage with followers and get lots of impressions and improve your presence there for anybody. Old school marketing is dead. No, old school marketing, well, when I say old school, it's things like snail mail, right? Who mails things anymore? Well, we all get things in the mail, right? I can tell you one of the most effective tools that we're using right now with a lot of our clients is regular US mail, postcards, and things like that. So old school marketing is not dead. And, we think that because, well, we've got the internet and we've got AI and we've got all these digital tools now, which they are great. But, it's a misconception to say that the old way we've walked away from it. For the mere reason that we think that, I think that's one of the reasons why, I'm finding such great success in things like postcards, because nobody else is doing it. And so you get a lot of visibility just from, being one of the standouts. Well, we've got a website, so we're marketing, everything's fine. Well, again, marketing is much more than just having a website. But I hear that a lot, that, we've got a really nice website, so I think we're in the game. All right, let's talk a little bit about how marketing supports the sales and even the recruiting program or the process. Well, first of all, marketing provides consistent messaging. Again, we talked about the big M and the little m, and how marketing's responsible for that brand, which is more than just the logo. The brand includes the messaging. How are we saying what we're saying? What's our unique value proposition? How are we differentiating ourselves, and how do we say that in a way that captures the market's attention, and do that across all of our entire organization. So not just in our direct client facing marketing efforts, but in everything that we do, in conversations the recruiter has with the candidate. Are those communications being consistent in terms of the strategic marketing plan that that particular company may have adopted? So again, marketing supports all of these efforts by making sure that the messaging is consistent. Of course, we talked about, marketing supports sales by generating qualified leads. So taking an unqualified, finding or dealing in the universe of unqualified leads and finding qualified leads out of those based on, customer profiles and things of that nature. Then taking those leads and advancing them and nurturing them. Again, we said this is a long game. So marketing's generated a qualified lead. Great. The lead isn't going to pick up the phone or place an order, online, or call with an order tomorrow. It quite often requires engagement over a period of time. Again, back to the long game. So marketing supports sales by finding qualified leads and then engaging with them over a period of time and nurturing them. And if this is being done consistently and day in and day out, there there will be a reduction or an improvement, if you will, in the sales cycle. In other words, time to close will shorten when you're dealing with more highly qualified leads that fit your profile. You'll find that's one of the first things that when your marketing efforts start really producing results, it's one of the first things you'll see, that the sales cycle is starting to close. The other thing on the other side of the coin, win ratios or closing ratios will improve. So again, if you're dealing with more qualified leads, and let's say you're closing 2 out of 10 before you had an effective marketing program because you were just basically throwing darts at the dartboard, and now you're being more targeted on who you're approaching, you may find that 2 out of 10 turns into 4 or 5 out of 10, just because again you're dealing with leads that are more closely qualified to what you offer and where your expertise is. Marketing improves sales and recruiting by, again, we talked about improving the level of visibility in the marketplace. So at least getting away from being completely invisible to being somewhere on that visibility level, right? And, continuing to generate a strong brand identity. So people are able to, the market is able to look at your brand or know your brand and understand its identity and know what vertical or verticals you're servicing just through the marketing efforts that you've generated. And the same for candidates as sales. So, again, higher level of candidates more closely qualified to the positions you're trying to fill. So quite often, we find ourselves getting, hundreds of more candidates, but we have to sort through and find the 20 or 30 that we can actually place in the roles that we have, in the orders that we have to fill. But again, if our marketing is targeting the more highly qualified candidates, or better matches, if you will, candidates that are better matches to the orders and the verticals we're dealing with, we don't need to find 100 to get 20. Maybe we only need to find 50 to get 20. And so again, it improves the ratio in terms of candidate acquisition and sourcing as well. Well, why do we want to align these functions? Well, we've kind of touched on this, but in order to improve the leads, the leads that are being provided, the higher quality leads, right? We kind of beat that up pretty much. What about improved customer retention? So again, if we are targeting clients and candidates that are more closely aligned with our business model and our verticals, and we're providing a higher level of service and meeting their expectations at a higher level, well, it only follows that we're going to have better retention of our customers, more long-term partnerships and relationships with them. What does that lead to? Well, that all leads to faster growth. There was interesting research. There's been a lot of research on this, but an interesting research project by this Serious Decisions. They do a lot of research on company growth and profitability. And every time they've conducted these surveys, they've found that companies, any company that has marketing and sales appropriately aligned or more effectively aligned, see much faster growth in their top line. In this case, the most recent research was 19%. It's almost 20% faster growth on top line and almost 15% more profitable on the bottom line, just by having those two aligned. Again, because of the things we've talked about, we're dealing with candidates, we're dealing with prospects that are more closely aligned to the services that we can provide. So the ratios we're just going to do better. Well, what does alignment look like? Well, it has to start with the organization. So the culture has to be aligned throughout the staffing organization. Operations to recruiting, to sales, to administration, all of those parts of the organization have to have alignment, first of all, before we even talk about aligning at the marketing and sales level. Of course, leadership has to be aligned as well, right? Everybody has to be on the same page. We hear that a lot, but I can tell you, I deal with a lot of staffing firms where there isn't a proper alignment at that level. And so you can't expect the functions of the organization to be properly aligned if the people in the organization are aligned. Once you have that, then, okay, now we can talk about how do we align sales and marketing. Well, we do that primarily through communication between those two functions. So there has to be ongoing positive and effective communication, not silos. And again, that's one of the first things I see when I deal with a staffing firm that has both sales and marketing functions. Usually where there's things that are, where things are going wrong, it's the fact that there isn't good, healthy, and regular, frequent communication between those two groups. They often report to different people, and that immediately causes some misalignment. So there has to be alignment in terms of communication and again, as I said, accountability by reporting relationships or maybe accountability between the two groups. So if marketing produces, a lead that's not qualified and it bombs out, it's not ultimately a failure to the marketing team. It's a failure to both of the teams. So there has to be some shared accountability in order to align both those functions. So you do that through communication, through leadership, through the organization supporting that alignment, and ultimately through the accountability. Well, let's look at a real simple marketing plan. I said I had a kind of a three-step marketing plan. So again, planning is where we start. I would call that strategy. You can call it planning, strategy, whatever you want to call it. And we do that by identifying, who are our audiences. Again, this is kind of a consistent theme that I've talked about throughout here. Do we know what our ideal client profile looks like? Do we know what our candidate profile looks like? Do we know where to find them? And do we know how to speak to them? So it's who we're trying to communicate with, what it is we're saying to them that's most effective, and there's certainly ways to clarify, more effective messaging just by trial and error. Really is kind of the best way you do it. A/B trials. And where do we find them? So if we know who we're trying to find and we know what we want to say to them, then we have to find out where are they, and then we want to take our message there. So that's a very high level strategy planning part of this process, if you will, to your marketing plan. Once you've done that, all right, now we're ready to pull the trigger. So again, as I said, where I find staffing firms quite often is right here. They've completely missed the planning step or the strategy step. So they haven't really, put together their consistent messaging, and they haven't really identified who they're trying to communicate with or where they are. It's just a shotgun approach versus a rifle approach. But once we've done the planning, all right, let's talk about execution. And so our effective marketing program and campaigns and all the things we're doing are going to identify qualified leads. We said that's the ideal function of marketing, is to find qualified leads out of that unqualified lead universe. So we capture them first of all, and then we have a way to contain them. So we bring them into our CRM or a marketing tool, whatever we have. We have to contain them. Again, this is a long game, which means we have to cultivate them, right? And then from there, ideally, we will have success in converting them to a new client. So really, it's those 4 C's. Those are the 4 C's of execution that we focus on when we deal with our staffing clients. We have to be able to capture them, but we do that by knowing who we're trying to capture, and then we contain them in some way to be able to cultivate them over a period of time, and then ultimately work through to conversion and new clients. But then there's a third part, right? So we're not done yet. Now we want to retain those clients, as we said earlier. One of the things of marketing is, if it's done effectively, we're dealing with clients who are more closely aligned with what our specialty and our expertise is, and they're going to want to stick around. So as I said, we're going to be able to exceed not only the client, but the candidate and employee expectations at a much higher level, makes them want to stick around longer. From that, we will continue to be able to increase our market share, or wallet share, if you will, within an internal client. We'll be able to capture more. And ultimately, we're going to develop what I call promoters. So we've got clients who will provide us with testimonials, right? Who will say good things about us, who will refer other opportunities to us. So that's kind of the Venn diagram of a three-step marketing plan. Very simple. And I like to keep these things simple and be able to create a plan that anybody can execute and put together and be able to manage and see results from. And of course, all of that leads to profitable growth, top line growth, and bottom line growth. So here's my kind of a graphical, pictorial display, if you will, of this whole lead process. What does it look like? Again, the 4 C's you'll see at the bottom. But if you start at the left-hand side, and we start with our brand, right? We've identified our brand. We know who we're trying to speak to. We know what we want to say. We know where they are. So the first step, again, is to capture them. And we use all of the various marketing tools that we can use, whether it's digital advertising or our marketing collateral and sales communications, content marketing through social media, our website and SEO, all of these tools, email marketing, and there's many, many more. But we use all of these tools, and we don't just use one. That's another area that I see quite often, that a client will be focusing on maybe one of the many different arsenals, in their toolkit that they can use to be able to communicate and generate leads from. We want to be doing all of these things. We want to spread our net wide and far, and because you never know exactly what's going to be most effective or where you'll get the most qualified leads coming from. That big lead circle, then that's oops, lost it. Hold on a second. The big lead circle then is, now we've generated some qualified leads, or some unqualified leads, I guess. I'm sorry. We've identified, a bucket to start to work from. And then, of course, once we've contained those, now we will cultivate those into qualified leads. So out of those leads that have that we've dumped into our containment bucket, if you will, some of those are going to, as we engage with them over a period of time in various ways and means, we're going to cultivate those into qualified leads. And from those, then, of course, we're going to have some who will say, I'd like to know more. Think back to that earlier slide we did, that, we're going from being invisible to visible to, hey, I'm interested, to, hey, I really want to, I'm compelled to know more. Those folks will say, yeah, I'd like to sit down and hear what you have to say. So we're in our sales process, providing a presentation and proposals and doing all the things we do to get them to convert to become new clients. And we do this with, new clients as well as current clients, expanding, our share in the current client, as well as, re-engaging with former clients. So that these tools are effective with all 3 of those categories. And then, but again, we often forget that there's one more step, and that is to, put them in this promoter. Ideally, we want them to be so satisfied or so delighted, if you will, as I've said in the slide, that they will help us generate new opportunities. So providing testimonials or making referrals, or, just being a strong promoter for our brand and for our service. That's ideally what we want to get to. And of course, that in itself goes a long way in retaining clients and keeping them as partners over a long period of time. So I want to talk about, see how we're doing on time here. All right. I want to talk real quick about growth here. And this is kind of a little bit, we've talked about marketing and the marketing plan and what marketing does, but I want to go a little bit different direction here and just touch on this real quick. This may all make sense to you, but again, a lot of times I have to sit down with staffing clients and prospects and talk about let's really think very carefully about what we know. Growth is important, but why? Well, because growth is healthy. Like with a human, growth indicates health and wellness. So the same thing is true for a company. If we're growing, we're healthy. Well, what else does growth do? It allows you to continue to satisfy your market. So if you're continuing to grow and expand, you're of course going to be expanding your market share in the market or markets that you're in, and that allows you to continue. It's called momentum. Once you started growing and you have market share, and you're pushing forward, you'll find that momentum alone contributes to additional growth. Growth provides for stability. So the more growth you have, the more stable your organization and your process and your business model becomes. Well, growth can also help capture efficiencies, and you can find ways to start creating um, methods or processes for a lot of the things that you do once you get to a certain level. When you first start out, you do whatever you have to do, right, to get a new client. And you may do it a completely different way the first 10 times. Ultimately, you get to a place though where it's time to say, all right, we need to have a process, we need to have a methodology for how we do this. And by having, growth often forces staffing firms to have to sit down and say, all right, we have to be more, we have to have more structure to how it is that we do what we do. And by having growth, a growth and healthy a growth oriented and healthy organization, that of course is a magnet for being able to attract highly level or more highly level and skilled levels of talent. Okay, growth and scale. So again, a lot of this is very confusing, and we often, misconstrue, like marketing and sales. We often think of growth and scale as the same thing, or we get there the same way. My experience, I had to learn this the hard way, is they are very different. So what I've said here for growth is, we have a business model, we have a process, we have a platform, and we just continue to do what we've always done, and we continue to grow, right? Sales continue to increase. I know this year it's been tough, but under more normal economic situation and circumstances, we'll see growth, to continue in its pattern by just us continuing to do it the way we've always done it. Nothing wrong with that. And what I say here is SG, your costs usually increase at about the same rate of sales, sometimes even faster than sales, but you'll see those two things, moving in the same direction. And we just continue to do that. And there's nothing wrong with that until you hit that brick wall. And some of you may have, and if you haven't and you want, and you're in growth mode, eventually you will. This happened to me several times where you're continuing to do what you've always done. And back to the old saying, you can't continue to keep doing what you're doing and expect to get different results. Well, at some point you hit a wall, and your process, your platform, the model that you're using, you're doing all the same things you've always done, but you're not getting growth, you're not getting results. And so it captures your attention, and you have to stop and say, what's going on here? What do we do in order to continue to grow? And that's really when we hit a place where we have to say that it's time to scale our business. So we've been growing, doing what we're doing. That's great. We hit a wall. It's profitability is stuck. Growth is stuck. Something has to happen. Well, that's where scale comes into play. So now we have to look at our current business model. We have to say something has to change. We can't keep doing it the same way we've been doing it. And that's the feedback that we're getting. So it could be any number of things that you have to do. I've got a whole different presentation about the 6 pillars of growth that talks about where some of the scale things need to take place. In other words, sometimes it's how the organization is structured. You have to restructure your organization to scale to the next level of growth. Sometimes it's about accountability of your teams. Sometimes it's about the communication process. There's any number of things, very high level things within the organization that often need to be looked at in order to say, what is it that's not, where are we getting bogged down? And we're going to have to change something about the way we do business, or we're going to continue to find our growth to be flat or non-existent. And so again, it's growth and scale are two sides of the coin, but are very different things. And I think we always need to take into account the fact that at some point, if we are in a growth mode, we will eventually experience that plateau, and we should be able to immediately recognize this is telling me I have to scale my business, and I have to look at something in order to I have to make a significant change somewhere, or in many ways, how we do business or where we're doing business in order to get that to that next level. And it looks kind of like this. And I'm going to stop with this because we are at 20 after. I stole this from the book called Breaking Through. It's an SIA book. Mike Clellan put that book together. I've always used this with his approval. I think this, because this is ideally what I experienced with my staffing firm. So you have a leadership maturity on the right-hand side, and then the growth trajectory on the left-hand side of our graph here. Startup is at the very bottom. The owner operates the startup. The owner does everything, right? You sell, you fill the orders, you do everything. And eventually you get to the point where you now have an independent operation. You've got some other folks that can take on some of those responsibilities, but it's still very early in its growth. And we see that little gold little step there between independent and organic scale. That's a scale, that's a place, that's one of those plateaus. That's a scale level where growth has to be scaled, right? Where scale now comes into play versus growth. So that's you'll find that you can only go so far as an independent operation, probably have multiple branches and continue to manage the business that way. But at some point you hit that plateau, and now I have to stop. I have to make some adjustments, and now I can organically scale the business. So I've scaled that first step, and now I can be more organic and look at additional expansion in other markets, other states, those kinds of things. I hit another wall. Now I have to scale again. And now I can look at expansion from a strategic standpoint. So now I'm talking about organic growth as well as acquisitions and maybe into other verticals and things like that. So growth often looks like this, but again, I think this is a great picture of how growth and scale work together to continue to grow, have upward growth. So with that, I'm going to skip the acquisition part here. Let me skip through this. I think so key takeaways, start where you are. Marketing can be done whether you're small, you're large. As we said, it doesn't matter. There are things you can do. I've said this several times throughout this conversation. Keep it simple. Start where you are and just start with something. Execute to completion. Don't stop halfway. Take it all the way through and have a measure to see how well it's working, but take it all the way through. And as I said, you want to measure to make sure you're getting the output that you expect. And if not, we have to make adjustments. As I said, it's very important to have a marketing foundation. Strategy precedes tactics. Tactics follow strategies. That foundation is a strong strategic plan. It doesn't have to be 100 pages. It can be one page, but have a strategy first. And remember, it's a long game. It's a long haul. It's a process. It's not an event. Marketing takes time, and it will, if done correctly, give you improved results. All right, with that, I'll stop and see if there's any questions. Clay, do you have any questions first?
I first want to say fantastic presentation, Jay. Thank you. I think you really kept it simple enough for us to take away the main concepts and take some really good information away here today. I guess one of the first questions I have that we struggle with internally in our organization, and maybe there's not necessarily one answer to this, Jay, but there are so many options out there for marketing and advertisement, right? You can look at traditional advertising, billboards, radio, television, etc., digital marketing, social media marketing, the list goes on. And I think sometimes it can be almost overwhelming, especially if you're starting from a point of not doing a lot of marketing in general. Do you have any words of wisdom for us on what is that place to start, or where do you start looking and understanding where your dollar is going to go the farthest, your investment is going to make the most impact? Because obviously that's the other part, is kind of managing the budgeting portion of it. So if you can talk on that a little bit, I'm very interested.
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's a great place to start. Probably could talk about that for another hour, but let's keep it concise. I would say that it, like anything, you gotta start with the basics. You've got to be able to you have to be able to execute on what are the foundational things that drive everything else, right? That's the easy part, is to say that. The hard part is to figure out what are they. And so I would say, I would answer the question like this. I think there's four areas that really four areas I think that need to be focused on at a very most elemental level if you really want to talk about where can I get the biggest bang for my buck. So number one, back to what we've already said here, what is our messaging? What is our branding? Are we clear on what we're saying to the marketplace. Are we saying the right thing to the right people? Think about that first box or that first circle in the Venn diagram. So we have that right. Make sure that's right. The second thing then is let's look at our website. Is our website up to date? Is it appealing? Is it engaging in terms of the content that is there, and in terms of its visual appeal, and again, you all know this is one of those things when you look at a website, you're not website experts, right? But you all can look at a website, you can look at two websites, and the first one you can say, this is a piece of crap. The second one you can look at and say, wow, this is really engaging. I really find this one interesting and I find it visually appealing. You'll know it when you see it. So number two is, do we have a website that has all of those elements, right? As well as, is it a tool that's going to allow us to be able to capture leads? Because ultimately your website is kind of your catcher's mitt. We're pitching through social media and email campaigns and all the things that we're, advertising, all the things we're doing. But ultimately, we ultimately want to drive that traffic back to our website. We want to get them started there. That's number two. Number three is then look at our social media. What are we doing there? We know our messaging is, we have strong imaging and engaging content on our website. We now take that and duplicate that in our platforms, whether it's LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, whatever you're doing. So the basic things there. Do we have engaging content in our social media platforms, and are we gaining followers? Are we getting a lot of impressions, and are we saying things? And again, a social media program is not just posting your job ads, okay, or saying happy Thanksgiving. It's having content that is consistent based on, number one, what's our branding messaging, what's our brand stand for, and being able to have an ongoing program that over time is very consistent, and you're there and you're visible in social media. Then number four, it's doing basic email marketing. Everybody, you've all got CRMs that maybe have some level of or sense, or you've got various tools that you can use to engage with your candidates, to engage with your prospects. And again, it's important to be able to nurture them over a period of time so that ultimately they say, hey, I'd like to know more, come see me. So really I guess maybe that took longer than I thought, but you got those are the basics. So in football, you come in and you learn what the fundamentals are, right? In marketing and sales and staffing, it's the same thing. What are the fundamentals? It's our messaging, it's our website, it's our social media presence, and it's our outreach campaigns. Those four things.
Great response. I think that was perfect. I have more questions. I certainly want to open it up to our other guests. If anyone has any questions for Jay, shout them out now or throw them in the chat. In the meantime, I guess one other question I had, Jay, that is always top of mind for me that you were talking about here today was measuring results, right? When you're doing that marketing, whether it be in one area or another, recruitment marketing or more of a B2B marketing, measuring results. What type of metrics are you really focusing on? I think that's sometimes the hard part. In what process or what part of that process? What are the really important metrics, or is it essentially like, I closed a customer today? Is that the only metric that matters? But I'm curious to know what we should really be measuring in that process.
Yeah, again, I get asked this all the time, and this is from a marketing perspective, it's hard because you know what, we're staffing people. We look for tangible results. Ultimately, we look for what you just said, Clay. Did I get a new client? Did what I did yesterday get me a new client today? Right? That's what we want. It's not how it works, but that's what we want. But you got to remember, go back to the slide that I talked about, the two definitions, the definition of marketing and the definition of sales. The definition of marketing is it's focused on inbound. It's focused on internal, generating an unqualified lead and making it qualified. Sales then is outbound, and they're responsible for turning that into an outcome, right? Marketing is not generally producing an outcome. They're an input, and then sales is the output. So the way to measure, really, if you're measuring sales, yeah, it's very easy. It's how many calls did I make, and how many out of those calls, how many presentations, how many sales. If we're talking about marketing, though, it's not so easy to say, well, I did some marketing and A and B, I got a new client. So in marketing, we're looking at what are the internal or the input things, the inbound things that we're responsible for. So we're looking at things like How many leads did we generate? Out of those, how many are qualified? We can identify those things. How many in our social media tools, how many people are seeing our content or impressions, right? Out of those, how many are taking action? We have call to action in most of our, content. How many people are actually taking the next step and going to the next level or clicking on something or asking for more information? And out of those, then how many are actually then moving into that presentation sales process where sales then takes over and is responsible for the outcome. So again, with marketing, it's more looking at what are we doing? How are we generating our inbound opportunities? Are we getting people and are we getting the right people to put in front of sales and business development, if that makes sense?
Does. Yeah, I think this is great. I wrote down a lot of things here. So thank you. Um, well, we're at time. This is a crowd that usually asks a lot of questions if they have them. They're not shy. So I think, Jay, you just answered a lot of questions here today. But if folks want to follow up with you or engage with you further, what is the best way for them to reach you or reach Terra Firma?
You go back here and I'll show you. So there's a nice little QR code. You would expect a marketing company to have that, right? So if you want to know more, just get your phone out and hit that QR code, and you'll know more than you ever wanted to know about Terra Firma. You're welcome to reach out to me at my email, which is jay@terrafirmamarketing.com, or our website, terrafirmamarketing.com.
Perfect. And we will be sending these slides that Jay provided here today to all of our participants and all of our attendees today. And we are recording this. It will probably go up on the WASS site as well as other places. Any final thoughts here for us, Jay? You can take us out.
I would just say again, is the most important thing to keep in mind. And I was on your side of the desk, every one of you. I expected, when I first engaged with my marketing company, they told me all these wonderful things I've just told you. And I said, great. So my phone should ring next week. And when it didn't ring, I was calling the principal of the marketing agency saying, hey, you guys are falling out on the job. I'm not getting new clients. And that's when we had to have our little sit down meeting where they said, look, you got this all wrong. The expectation is completely wrong. Marketing is a long-term process that will yield results if you have the ability and the willingness to stick with it. So, like I said in that last slide, stay with it, take it to completion, take it all the way through. Do the right things, but keep doing them. And don't, what's the old saying? Don't pull up the flowers to see if the roots are growing. That doesn't work. It just doesn't work. So I've enjoyed this time with all of you, and again, you are all fantastic staffing professionals, and I marvel at all of you, and thank goodness that you're doing what you're doing. It's a great industry.
Well, thanks, Jay. We appreciate all your time and expertise today. Thank you to Terra Firma as a strong industry partner. And thanks to all of you for jumping on here today.
Thanks, everybody. See you all later.